Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this special DJAP morning briefing on the French parliamentary elections. I'm Henning Hoff, Executive Editor of Internationale Politik Quarterly. Well, quelle surprise! After President Emmanuel Macron had called a snap election 4 weeks ago, the general expectation had been that the far-right Rassemblement National, led by Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, would gain a majority in the Assemblée Nationale, possibly an absolute one. Yesterday, however, things turned out quite differently. The Nouveau Front Populaire, combining the far left La France Insoumise, the Communists, the Greens, and the Socialists, came first with 182 seats, followed by Macron's Ensemble with 166 seats. Only third came Rassemblement National, with 143 seats. The center-right Les Républicains and their split-off came fourth with 60 seats, according to Le Monde. C'est Ouf ran the left-leaning Libération newspaper's headline all night. It is crazy, I believe, is the best translation. The outcome is certainly a big surprise. Le Pen, for her part, claimed that the victory was only postponed and that the far-right's tide continued to rise. So what does this result mean for France and his much criticized president? Prime Minister Gabriel Attal will offer his resignation to Macron this morning, but will probably stay in post for a few more days or weeks. What government will eventually emerge from this hung parliament, and which is the big question of the day, and we should all know that it can be dissolved only after a year. And another question, of course, is what this all means for Germany and Europe as a whole. To discuss this, I have the pleasure of welcoming Britta Sandberg, Paris correspondent for Der Spiegel. Britta Sandberg studied in Munich and Paris. For 16 years, she worked as a reporter, presenter, and editor at Spiegel Television before switching to the magazine's front desk in 2006. From 2012 to 2019, she was Spiegel's first female foreign editor and has since reported from Paris. A very warm welcome, Britta Sandberg.
Good morning.
Also with us is Jakob Ross, Research Fellow for France and the Franco-German relationship here at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Before joining DJAP, Jakob inter alia served as at the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in Brussels and the French Foreign Ministry, the Quai d'Orsay. He has also contributed to the latest issue of Internationale Politik Quarterly on the Franco-German relationship, an article headlined France, Germany, and the Nature of Europe, which I'd like to recommend to you. And we will post the link in the chat in a moment. Some quick housekeeping remarks to start us off. Our two panelists will share their assessment of the outcome of the French vote. After some discussion on the panel, we will be opening this for your questions and comments. For the Q&A, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and put your question in person to the panel. You're also welcome to submit questions and comments via the chat function. Please note that this briefing will be recorded and that we have to close on time at the very latest at 9:30 a.m. And with a word of thanks to my colleagues Jan Stöckmann, Milan Itsch, Julia Loeva, Wiebke Evering, Helga Beck, and many more, who keep these briefings running, as well as to our colleagues in the events and communication teams. Let's start with Britta Sandberg. And of course, what we all want to know is, what does this mean for France?
At the time, something good, because the Rassemblement National could be prevented from governing. I mean, the last 7 days, we saw a lot of articles, a lot of scenarios that Jordan Bardella, the 20-year-old designed prime minister, could effectively enter Matignon, the building where the prime minister has his office, and there were a lot of names already in preparation at Rassemblement National, who could be minister, who could be part of the government. So this didn't turn out to be true. And at the time, so what nobody knew before, the so-called Front Républicain, the Republican resistance against Rassemblement National and the right wing or radicals has been working once again. That means that the fear of the Rassemblement National governing France is still very present and alive. But it's at the time of victory and not a victory because there is no clear majority. That means that we go to looking forward to a period where nobody knows for the moment who will be governing. And the other thing I'm very worried about is the Rassemblement still remains the strongest single party. I mean, it's not, you can't say that they really lose these elections because they have still a significant number of voters who had been voting for them, around 10 million, I think. Jacob should perhaps correct me. And so these 10 million voters are quite frustrated, and the so-called déficit démocratique, the French are always claiming about and regretting, is once again showing up here, because what we see now in Parliament doesn't really, and as results, doesn't really reflect the will, the vote of the voters in general. If you look at the figures and numbers.
Thank you very much, Jakob. You want to come in maybe and share your observations of this vote?
Yes, thank you very much, Henning, and thank you for all those who are tuning in this morning early. Well, before maybe getting back to what Britta just said, which is very important, I think two quick facts that are worthwhile highlighting. Participation was very high again, which is a good thing, I'd say. So start with the positive notes. There was higher voter turnout than ever since the 1980s, despite the French already being on vacation in parts of the country. Surprisingly, the polling was very much off for the second tour. The polling in France tends to be very precise, or has been for the European elections just at the end of or in the beginning of June, and then for the first round of the parliamentary elections in France. Now it was completely off. I mean, very far from what really happened then and what the final results looked like. Now, maybe to start off with regards to France, I would also like to come back to two interpretations that I read quite a bit yesterday on social networks in the media. The first one being that President Macron finally won his gamble after dissolving the National Assembly, that he, against all odds, prevented a far-right victory. I found this very unconvincing. He lost a lot of seats, a lot of allies in the National Assembly. He will definitely lose many ministries. He might lose the whole of government. France is entering a phase of uncertainty and instability, even though, as Britta just said, a Rassemblement National relative majority or even absolute majority was clearly prevented. And then a second take on this election being that the Rassemblement National lost this election. As a snapshot, this might be true to a certain degree, just because polling gave them so many more seats. There was a lot of deception yesterday when people interviewed Rassemblement National people, representatives. But then again, just to give you the numbers, I'm not sure if they are final, but they give you an impression. Around 10 million French voters chose the Rassemblement National yesterday. Only 7 million or a little more chose the Nouveau Front Populaire, and 6.3 million the Ensemble coalition of President Macron. This is not at all represented or reflected in the National Assembly now. And so this will give or fuel the existing criticisms. There's already a lot of conspiracy theories turning around the fact that the election was kind of stolen to a certain degree, not coming from political officials, but growing on social media. And so we will have to wait how this plays out. at least for 1 year, that long the National Assembly can't be dissolved again. But then also with regards to what President Macron will do if he can hold until 2027 when the next presidential elections will take place. Now, I think we can come back to the different scenarios on the new government in the further discussion. But I mean, this morning, it's very unclear. There's a lot of options on how things might go forward. What is also clear, from my understanding at least, is that Gabriel Attal, the acting prime minister, will stay in office at least for a couple more days, maybe weeks, just because the Summer Olympics are starting in roughly 2 weeks, a little more, on the 26th of July. And so France really needs an acting government for the time being.
Many thanks, Jakob. You just mentioned one thing I wanted to put to Britta Sandberg before we move on to the wider implications of this situation in France. What do you? Well, it was a gamble, most observers said, of Macron's call of a snap election. How do you see the president after this election? Can he rightfully say, well, I broke this wave? After the devastating result of the European election, he can now point to his party coming second. Is that in some way sort of strengthening him again a little, or do you see him damaged for the rest of his time in office?
I mean, it's a little bit of both sides, but I think he's the most important thing that he's really weakened. He has been weakened before for several reasons, but the French papers this morning are titling "Il a sauvé les meubles." I don't know the exact English translation, but it might be he saved the furniture, if this exists as a in English. But so nobody expected that Ensemble, the coalition of the government majority, would be on second place before Rassemblement National. Although, if you regard precisely the numbers, 13 deputies, 13 seats in Assemblée Nationale are separating Ensemble and Rassemblement National. So it's not a really convincing victory. And as we know, it's a victory due to the agreement between the government majority and Nouveau Front Populaire that took place before, because there were over 300. This is quite special and detailed, but you have to see and explain it because it was decisive for the outcome of this election. There are 577 parts, circonscription. So how do you call it in English? Areas where the election took place in the whole country. In 309 of them, you had initially 3 candidates, and the government majority and the Nouveau Front Populaire agreed to withdraw the candidate who had the less chances to be elected, to reduce the chances for the Rassemblement National. That's what Rassemblement National, the right-wing part, are now claiming to be a big manipulation. Once again, the elite in Paris stood up against them and falsed their results, and it's going, as Jakob mentioned, up to the critique that this has been a stolen election. So I think Macron is weakened for several reasons, and he can't really say that his gamble had been success, and his strategy has been successful, because when you look at what he aimed to succeed, to have initially clarification of the political situation, this didn't take place because now it's more confusion than before. Before they had 240 seats, the government majority. Now they have 166. And then there was always the question whether he was not in a second phase also playing with the idea that a prime minister called Jordan Bardella would once he would start at government, very quickly show that Rassemblement National is not able to govern this country, and to avoid by the strategy that in 2027, when the next presidential election is scheduled in France, Marine Le Pen couldn't enter the Élysée. So these 2 points he was not successful in. And there is another very important point which comes in also, because a lot of his followers, a lot of the so-called Macronistes de la première heure, those who had been following him from the very beginning, who had been campaigning with him in 2016 and 2017, very quickly after this decision to have the dissolution of the parliament, took their distances very clearly, and you can't come back to. I mean, they won't approach him once again, or they won't come back on this position. So I think he's very lonesome at government. He would now try to win time, to see what to do, but it's not at all easy how to govern this country with these 3 blocks and no clear majority anywhere.
Thank you very much. And Jakob, before we move on to the wider implications, maybe just one, 2 sentences of what might happen next. Sort of what is the most likeliest next step in your view?
Well, I think again that Attal will stay in office as an acting prime minister of an acting government to keep things together, at least during the Summer Olympics, with regards to the coming weeks. And behind the scenes, there will be a lot of talk ongoing within the Nouveau Front Populaire. The Macron and the governing parties might try to get some of the parties out of the Nouveau Front Populaire, to get the Greens and the Social Democrats, or the Socialistes, the French Socialists, to leave this Nouveau Front Populaire, which I think is not very probable of happening. I mean, it was a great success for the left to be united, and now this is confirmed with this election. So I would be very surprised if they leave this alliance right away. Just a very quick comment, Henning, if you allow me, on the question of Macron winning or not winning his gamble. I think the only point where you could say that he won the gamble to a certain degree is that when he announced and justified his choice of dissolution with putting the choice to the French electorate after what happened in the European elections. I mean, this succeeded to a certain degree. He showed yesterday that a majority of French voters are still not wanting Rassemblement National government. That's what showed in the polling, even though, again, the most votes went to Rassemblement National, but that he put French voters into responsibility. He told them, if you want to confirm this choice of the European elections in a national election, go forward. Seems what would happen after the first round didn't happen last night, but now, I mean, he has to build on that, or the French political system really has to build on that, because otherwise I fear it's true what Marine Le Pen said, that the tide is still rising in favor of the Rassemblement National, and that the trend is still going up.
Thank you very much. And Britta Sandberg, sort of what does a France which is sort of in chaos, without a clear majority, with a weakened president, what does that mean for Germany and for Europe as a whole?
But I think this means exactly what we predicted also for a victory of Rassemblement National. Macron will be a very weakened president. Macron, who was the one who always tried to put forward European sovereignty, and a more a stronger European defense policy, more independent from US. He will be in a very tough situation to. I mean, he can't push forward these goals anymore, these aims anymore, because he has no backing at home, and up to now we don't know who will be definitely in the ministries at government. But I mean, if you look at Nouveau Front Populaire, they really want something else, and there's no, even though before he has no absolute majority because he had like 250 seats and the majority is 289, he was much more comfortable. And all the ministers and all the, I mean, he controlled the whole government game. So this is no longer the case. So, and the irony is that tomorrow, now we are the 8th, tomorrow he will be heading to the NATO summit to Washington. So this will be the first time in international relations he had to behave somehow, but I think he's very weakened. And if you look at the German-French relationships, there is no, I mean, they were in difficulties before. Nothing will be easier now. And I think even that inside Europe, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz now is in a situation where he should take more responsibility, should go forward more quickly, and should somehow perhaps replace the role that Macron had up to now. But knowing Olaf Scholz and the difficulties in his own coalition, I doubt that this will happen. So I think could be kind of, I don't know how to call that. Would it freeze German-French relationships? Anyhow, what we can say today, this morning, is it will weaken them for the moment. And if you look at the 3 blocks, I can't see how this would change in the coming month.
Thank you very much. And Jakob, what is your assessment? Do you share this kind of pessimistic view, maybe?
Well, I mean, it's a bit sad to be pessimistic this morning, just because the relief was so big yesterday when the results came out. But I agree actually with Britta, and I agree also based upon the conversations we had in Paris last week. We talked to a lot of people in ministries at the National Assembly. I mean, with the staff of parliamentarians who were in the electoral campaign still, with businesses. I mean, if you look at the businesses, for instance, many more, I would argue, from what we have heard, it's anecdotal certainly, but still, were afraid of a Nouveau Front Populaire victory than were of a Rassemblement National victory. I mean, the economy is afraid of what the Nouveau Front Populaire might do, might try to do in the coming weeks and months, might put into the government coalition. Maybe, I mean, to give you a couple of examples, some of them were discussed before this election, but since we were so focused on the danger of the Rassemblement National taking part in the next government, I think the Nouveau Front Populaire and some of their most radical points in the program were a bit ignored, but they want to use the first 15 days in power as a time of disruption, as they call it. So, I mean, quite similar to what Macron said at the beginning of his presidency. The Nouveau Front Populaire wants to declare a state of social emergency, wants to introduce price breaks for basic necessities in food, in energy, fuel. These prices should be freezed by decree, so the new prime minister could act that very quickly, should he come or she come from the Nouveau Front Populaire alliance. They want to turn back the pension reform that President Macron had introduced against a lot of infighting in the French political system. There were strikes for weeks, but the pension reform passed. And I mean, international partners were relieved that Macron showed that this was possible, even though there was a lot of resistance in France. So they want to go back from the retirement age of 64 to 60, probably. I mean, if you compare to neighboring countries, not least in Germany, that's quite a difference. Minimum wages are to be raised, where many smaller businesses say that they couldn't compete with these wages. So it remains to be seen what the effects will be. And then probably the most frightening point for Germany, but also for the European Union, the new Commission, is that the so-called austerity constraints of the Growth and Stability Pact are to be rejected. This is part of the Nouveau Front Populaire program. They don't want to accept the Maastricht rules anymore. And if you look at the current situation already, I mean, this was a major topic in the campaign during the past 2-3 weeks, that France is already in shambles with regards to public finances, that the public finances are not at all in a good state, and that this could change for the worse in going forward. And so, I mean, I didn't have a look. I don't know if the markets are open already, financial markets, but I expect there to be a reaction on this side as well, which could put Macron and the acting government under a lot of pressure.
Many thanks. And with that, I would like to open it up for your questions as well. So please raise your hand, and I'm very happy to call you up and give you a chance to put your question in person to the panel. There's already one up, and there's 3 questions in the chat as well, which I'll try to put to the panel as well. But let's hear from Thomas Mettig first. Please introduce yourself and put your question to the panel, please.
Thank you. Thomas Mettig from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. I have a question regarding the power balance within the Nouveau Front Populaire. Would you say that moderate forces have been strengthened, or have rather radical forces around Mélenchon have been strengthened? And if so, what implications would that have for a possible NFP-led government? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's a second one by Christophe Raoult. Please come on and put your question to the panel.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm chairman of the Deutsch-Französische Gesellschaft Frankfurt. I put my question in the chat. We've got 3 political blocs, none of them having the possibility to build a majority on its own. So the true question is, which one of these blocs can be broken up in order to build a coalition with a majority in parliament? I think there is a good chance that this breakup is possible within the leftist movement, because we have political parties coming from communist to social democrats, not agreeing on Ukraine, not agreeing on the attitude to Putin, not agreeing on all these expenses Mélenchon is standing up for. So that would be my question.
Thank you very much. And maybe let's take the 2 first. Who wants to go first? Maybe Britta Sandberg?
Yeah. But I would say that if you look at the seats within the NFP, Le Nouveau Front Populaire, the most important group is the one of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, La France Insoumise. So this would, you would say that this is strengthening, or once confirming that he's still alive, and the left-wing populist gauche is the strongest part of this bloc. So then the other question is, if are the others, so the communists, the socialists, and the ecologists, how they call them, so the green here, are willing to split up this union, which might be very difficult. And they are not agreeing on a lot of things in this union. So it's really, really hard to say what will be the outcome. What you can clearly see is that Mélenchon is asking for power. He was the first one to speak yesterday, just minutes after 8 p.m. So he claimed that Macron should decline, that the prime minister should leave. He is clearly trying to control the game and asking for power. So yeah, the question, this can clearly be answered. These more radical forces have been strengthened. Concerning the question, which of these three blocks could be broken up for a coalition? Certainly not Rassemblement National. So you stay with another two blocks. Yeah, and if you think in what Macron had been claiming for before, this Republican forces of raison and democracy, this could theoretically be possible with the PS, with the socialists, with the Green Party. Macron said before that he would be willing to govern or to enter a coalition with LFI, with the Mélenchon party. But this is the other problem. You could theoretically think that the conservative Republicans, who had like 45 seats, I think, could join a coalition. But they also did for the moment exclude this option, saying they would not enter in a coalition with Macron. So it's really very, very hard to say what will happen in the next weeks and months. I think there will be something the French are not used to. They will take a long time to discuss and to negotiate and trying to have a government, which could still be a kind of technocrat government, I think. It's not for sure that the prime minister would be coming from one of the two blocks, apart the Rassemblement National. This could also be a personality who has a more, how to say, a technocrat profile.
Many thanks. I heard the name of Christine Lagarde being mentioned in that connection.
Nice. I wonder if she would accept.
Yeah, that is indeed a good question. Jakob, do you want to come in?
Yes, I mean, maybe with regards to the explanation that the expectations or the analysis was so off, both with regards to polling, but also, I mean, what I and many more said prior to the election. I said during the past week that Rassemblement National relative majority was the most the most probable outcome. I think this goes to the fact that there's no historic precedent, really. I mean, you had cohabitation, so situations where the president comes from one party, the prime minister or parliamentary relative majority or absolute majority from another one, but never a situation where the extreme right, the Rassemblement National, was so strong that it forced all the other parties in the political system to get together to talk about coalition alliances, which made the situation for the second round really unpredictable. Some people now go to say that France is actually possibly returning to a logic of the Fourth Republic, so preceding the Fifth Republic, with quickly changing majorities in parliament, governments that don't stay in power for longer than a couple of weeks, which I think is really not good news. I mean, at least not until there's a new stability found or new constitutional consensus on how the institutions should work. I think that this election showed that a lot of French are fed up with the presidential system, with this very powerful president in the middle of it all, a powerless parliament. So that's an optimistic view on what happened yesterday, that parliament could be in the middle of the power games and could try to establish its role in the institutional systems. But yes, I mean, there's no historic precedent, at least not in the past decades. Maybe just a quick point on the power dynamics within the left alliance, within Nouveau Front Populaire. Britta is right. The extreme left, La France Insoumise, won most seats. But you could argue, and that's what the socialists are doing and the Greens are doing, that the dynamic is in favor of the moderate forces within the alliance. Just because the seats of LFI were pretty stable. I think they got 73 parliamentarians elected yesterday. the Parti Socialiste doubled their seats. So they got a lot more than they had since 2022. And if you look at the different constituencies, LFE apparently had a success rate in the second tour of 32%, whereas the Parti Socialiste had a success rate of 65%, where they put people. So they will argue, and they already did yesterday and today, that the trend is in their favor, that Mélenchon has to acknowledge this. But if he will listen to these voices, that's another question, I think. If the sentiment in France really imposes itself that this is a good moment to change it all, to change the institutional system, to go forward with what some have called a sixth republic, give more power to parliament, weaken the president's role, then I think the Parti Socialiste and the Greens might actually more in charge, just because of the reputation that LFE has gained in the French National Assembly. If you talk to parliamentarians, be it from Macron's parties, be it from the center-left parties, center-right parties, they hated how LFE played their role in parliament, in the National Assembly. They were very loud, very misbehaved. They disrupted sessions. They bring foreign flags into the plenary session. They waved Palestine flags in plenary sessions. So that's not really what the center-left parties would want to go forward with if change had to come. But again, I mean, for me at least, again, it's very subjective, but for me, the dominant figure of the French left yesterday, at least in media, was Jean-Luc Mélenchon. So we will have to see.
Thank you very much. And very quickly, Britta Sandberg, a question from the chat. Manfred Eisenbach asked. No, sorry, this is someone else. But the question sort of, Lutz Uphoff asking, sort of, can Macron sort of overrule Parliament and just ignore what's going to happen in the Assemblée Nationale? Is that an option in the Fifth Republic?
I mean, as you know, the French president can always, for some projects, governed by this famous Article 49.3, but he needs a prime minister to do it. And I think the political situation, part of the constitution rules, is not like that he can now just ignore the parliament. And he said the opposite yesterday. He said he will now take time to see the structure in parliament coming up to decide what to do. So he somehow said he would wait to look what parliament is what happens in parliament, which is already a move that he says, I will respect parliament, which is not always the case in France, as you know. So I think he knows. I always thought last week that he might be very bad, Macron, in a bad condition, because everything he calculated for it. I mean, his game didn't go out. It was too risky, and the gambler didn't win. So I think he also, for political strategic reasons, he won't ignore parliament, even if the constitution is giving him some means to do it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Two more hands are up, Thomas O'Donnell and my colleague Milanich. Thomas, please introduce yourself and put your question to the
Yes, Tom O'Donnell. I work on energy and geopolitics. I live in Berlin, but I'm with the Wilson Center in Washington. My first question, I mean, just a little bit of a challenge or something to Jacob, or if you stand back and you look at what was said were Macron's reasoning for why he did this in the beginning. Of course, he didn't speak to much of anybody, but people close to him, I think, said he saw the rise of the right. They had won the European election. Better not have one of these firewalls like the Germans have. Let them in parliament. They'll have a couple of years. Let's see if they can handle this. Give them a chance. And it's better to do it in a limited time. The longer they're on the outside, the more they're going to build up. It'll be an explosion. Now, the problem is they did very well the first time, but everybody saw the possibility of stopping them. And so he got a little schizophrenic, it seems to me. And I think it's be careful, you might get what you wish for. Now he's, which gets to my second question, more like for Britta, perhaps, is what I see here, again, standing back some distance. Macron tried to save the sort of traditional status quo, whatever you want to call it, French society. By going outside the normal parties, he tried to save the system. What's happened now is overwhelmingly the votes on the far right, or not far, but on the right and the left outside that, overwhelmingly, something like 2/3? Now, unlike some of the far right and far left in Germany, Mélenchon might not get along that well with Le Pen. But so my question is, it's interesting looking at it, quote, objectively, but what people say. Le Pen has gone and moderated everything sort of possible. Anti-Semitism, Frexit, things, the way she talks about immigrants. Mélenchon never expected to be in power. He hasn't moderated anything. And I know, I mean, his politics are very similar to what I'm familiar with in the South or in Latin America. And this, I don't know, some of this stuff on international affairs can be moderated in any way. I mean, he's for Hugo Chavez and so forth. But anyway, I could go on about a number of the issues, but so that's a reflection I'd like to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. And there's Milan Nitsch.
Yes, good morning. I'm a senior fellow at DGAP for Central Eastern Europe. I have a question about foreign policy implications, but before I go there, let me have a reaction to Tom O'Donnell and a follow-up question to you. Because it seems to me that what happened in France, the mobilization of everybody against the far right, with the highest turnout in 40 years, I wonder if this is something that is happening for the last time, that people are tired from politics. It's to have such a high turnout in elections in a polarized country, it's not a given. I wonder how you see this fact that this was presented as not only historical elections, but one time to save something, to save the country. And if this fails, if the next government, whoever forms it, will not perform, will not deliver on what people expected, voters, many different things, that we might have even a bigger landslide by the far right. In other words, that this is we are all relieved, those who don't like the far right as an option, but still you have, I think they are, what I want to bring in reaction to Tom O'Donnell is also a little bit of concern. And now my question is about foreign policy, because what I see happening across Europe in polarized countries like France is that foreign policy is used by leaders as a symbolic thing to deliver to voters that don't like continuity and status quo. And I wonder, what can the next government change as a course? What was the totemic issue for especially the United Left? Israel, for instance, what were they promising to their voters on Ukraine and the enlargement?
Thank you very much, Milan. And maybe I can add one more question from the chat, which was also referring to foreign policy, whether Macron will alter his policies on Ukraine and Russia, given that if you check the hard left and Rassemblement National together, a sizable number of French people want a different kind of approach. Would you expect him to somehow react to that as well? Who wants to start, Britta?
Start, yeah. I would perhaps start with the first question on this, this strategy to let them to let the Rassemblement National be in the government, and to say now, if everybody, or if 10 million French do want them, let them give the possibility to prove that they can be, that they are able to govern. Yes, I think this is somehow the heart of the problem, and I I mean, we are relieved that this doesn't happen, but at the same time, I think a lot will depend on the coming year, because perhaps in 1 year the parliament will be dissolved once again. But the risk or the danger that this finally will make the Rassemblement National even bigger, because there's such a lot of frustration within the democratic representation in this country, which has been there since a long time. I mean, not only the Rassemblement National voters are saying that there is a déficit démocratique, that their vote doesn't count due to the electoral system. So I think, yes, you're right. This is can we name it a failed opportunity? I wouldn't say that this had been would have been a good thing, Rassemblement National in the government, but the risk that this is making their chances to enter Élysée in 2027 much bigger is definitely there, I think. The second question you ask is, Macron tried to overcome the system, this classical left-right political system installed in France since decades. I think, yes, he did try it, and he did promise a lot of things he couldn't hold then. And finally, I think he very much tried to take advantage. He turned out first the left, I mean the classical socialist part, because a lot of politicians were attracted to his kind of politics, and then afterwards, with the more conservative turn, on the other end, he attracted the Republicans, and both the classical Republican parties were losing importance under Macron in the last 7 years. And he then once, as an electoral strategy, took profit from the both extreme sides, more from the Rassemblement National. But I mean, he won the presidential election 2 years ago, saying, "Ooh, if you won't vote for me, there will be Marine Le Pen." This was quite practical for him. So it's not that easy when we are saying he tried to overcome the system. Shortly to the high turnout here, it's a relief, but as you say, and as I mentioned before, it's also a democracy problem if 10 million voters aren't represented at all in the outcome of this election. And what concerns foreign policy, I mean, everything will depend on what kind of political forces we will finally see in government. So you can't really say what will happen. We all know the very problematic positions of Mélenchon concerning Hamas and Israel, but will they play a role? We can't say it for now because we don't know who will be governing. But the one thing that will be for sure is that we will have a weakened president who will not be in the situation to push forward projects on the international relations, I think, anymore. Will he alter his Ukraine policy? I mean, I think no. Macron will try to as long as he can to maintain his way to help Ukraine. Budget-wise, the budget for 2024 is decided. France will give 3 billion euros to Ukraine. There are military projects that had been decided. So for 2024, this won't change a lot of things. The question is what will happen after that.
Thank you very much. Jakob?
Yes, maybe just following up on this last point that Britta made. I mean, the initial decision of Macron to dissolve the National Assembly was due to the fact, reportedly, that he was afraid to lose his government anyway in the budget discussions in September. So these discussions will come up and they will be super conflictual, I think. I mean, maybe with regards to Ukraine aid, but certainly with regards to many other points and projects including the ones that I talked about earlier, price breaks. I mean, this will cost a lot of money, the program that they want to implement. So to make room for this, other ministries will have to cut their budgets, I guess. So that there will be a lot of discussions for the budget for the coming year, which also goes to the question Milan brought up on foreign policy, on the totemic issue for the campaign for the Nouveau Front Populaire, which, at least to my understanding, was austerity to a certain degree on the European level. The fact that the European institutions, but also oftentimes Germany, which is seen as this power pulling strings in the background, is preventing national states to indebt more, to increase social spending, to make due investments. I think that the decision of Scholz recently not to back more common debt on the European level, not necessarily with regards to arms deliveries to Ukraine, but in general as a question of principle, will be brought back to the table by the new government, should the Nouveau Front Populaire be part of it and play a major role in it. Other foreign policy issues, as Britta already stated, include Israel and the war with Hamas in Gaza. The program of the Nouveau Front Populaire includes that there should be a disruption in the relationship with Israel, a strong condemnation of the far right, I quote, government of the Netanyahu government, that the French government will root for a ceasefire, that they would try to impose a ceasefire, which, I mean, seems a bit overreached for French diplomacy, but still, I mean, this will be an important topic, especially to the far left. And then on Ukraine, I mean, everybody's curious if what they put into this consensus program will hold true actually after the elections, because La France Insoumise, Mélenchon personally, they had very strong positions on NATO support for Ukraine that were at times seen as pro-Russian, or at least on this traditional equidistance position between Russia and the United States. Mélenchon and LFI wanted France to leave the NATO's military command. This got voted out of the program. It's not figuring in the program, in the current program anymore. But again, I mean, this was only a program that they came up with in a very short time under a lot of pressure. So it's not at all certain that this will hold in the coming weeks and months, and this could lead to a lot of conflicts. And I would just very rapidly want to comment on what Tom said as well. I think that there is indeed a danger that the Rassemblement National could actually, in the long run, profit from what happened yesterday, just because, I mean, everybody could see that they weren't ready, that a lot of candidates in different constituencies were completely off. I mean, they weren't prepared. They had very weird statements on live TV, and I think this damaged the Rassemblement National to a certain degree. So I think they will use the time they now gained to a certain degree to get more professional people in, to be more prepared next time. And also, and this is probably a point where it's interesting from a German perspective, going forward, the Rassemblement National will certainly play the fact that they are now the only alternative in the political system, because, I mean, from the far left, LFI, to the moderate right, there's a block that kind of prevented them from gaining power, from gaining power due to popular demand. And so I think this will continue. And so if the new government, whatever it looks like, doesn't find convincing answers to the problems that brought many French to vote for the Rassemblement National, I think then we only gained time yesterday, and the dynamic will continue to play in favor of the Rassemblement National.
Thank you very much. And to wrap up, we are almost out of time now. My final question to our two panelists would be sort of to put yourself in, say, Jens Plöttner's boots, and what would be your advice to the German government, the German chancellor, how to deal with this France in flux with this sort of very uncertain situation. Britta Sandberg already suggested in an ideal world, Chancellor Scholz should become more of a leader of Europe, but this is not very likely. But what would be the one piece of advice you'd give to Berlin in this situation?
I mean, Berlin can't really influence what will be happening inside parliament and government, but the evidence seems to be that, yes, they should support the reasonable democratic forces, the pro-European forces, and they should perhaps support more than before European efforts, because the weakened president, as I said before, won't be able to push them forward as before. I mean, we remember it seems a long time ago, but it was, I think, in April, Jacob, that Macron held his second Sorbonne speech with a lot of demands for Europe. So as I said before, I think support for these European unity, sovereignty, which seem to be more endangered than before now. And perhaps, putting up demands from Germany that before had been asked for by Macron, and who now is in a position where he can't do it as he did it before.
Thank you very much. And Jakob.
Well, I mean, first of all, not very optimistic advice, but prepare for the worst case scenarios, just because we gained time yesterday, I think, to a certain degree. And then on a more practical level, I would say that the German government should definitely make more use of the people in Paris. There's so many German exchange officers, exchange diplomats, other bureaucrats that work within the French administration, which at times have a very good connection to their sending ministries in Berlin, but at other times are not really used as antennas for what's going on in Paris. And so I think there's a lot of potential to keep in touch with them, to really use them as sources of information implemented in the French administration. And then maybe a second one for the political impetus, I would recommend to be constructive, whatever the partner on the other side, to be formally consistent with regards to Franco-German relations, to not offend anybody, be it Rassemblement National, LFI, and really to avoid giving these parties any reason to paint Germany as this controlling power in the European center that pulls the strings, because there's so many rumors and false theories about that already circulating in France. And I think that as a minimum, that should be avoided going forward with whatever government and partners in France there may be in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm bringing this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for joining us this morning to the special morning briefing brought to you by the German Council on Foreign Relations. Please join me in thanking our two panelists, Britta Sandberg, of course, from Der Spiegel in Paris, and Jakob Ross, German Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you all very much. We take a break now over the summer, and we will be back later in August. So have a good week, have a good summer, and see you soon at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Goodbye.
Thank you.